This handsome man, named Chol, was at the social services office that day to find out about his family. There, he was given an address and asked to meet someone. Chol then arrived at a market and was taken to a woman in her 50s named Mrs. Kiwok. Seeing Chol standing behind her, Mrs. Kiwok was surprised. He was already this big. Mrs. Kiwok also knew he was there to find out her origins. Mrs. Kiwok then recounted an incident several decades ago. There was a student named Songho who was on a social research assignment in a village. Upon arriving at his destination, Songho rented a room to stay in during his research. One day, while resting, Songho accidentally noticed a small hole in the floor of his room, directly above the room of another resident downstairs. In the downstairs room was a beautiful woman in her 40s, dressed in uniform. It was obvious what she meant. The woman's name was Taeyol. Her husband was a police officer and often left his wife alone. Songho continued to observe the woman even while she was sleeping. A few moments later, Taeyol's husband, Hiran, returned home. As soon as he arrived, Hiran immediately engaged the sleeping Taeyol in a passionate kiss. Songho, who witnessed the incident, naturally wanted to do the same. Since that incident, Songho had been thinking about Taeyol, imagining being intimate with him. One day, Hiran intended to go upstairs to get to know Songho. However, he slipped on a baseball and abandoned his plan. Because of the incident, the spare key from his house fell out, which Songho took. Songho had memorized Hiran's return schedule, so one night he snuck into Taeyol's house using the key. There, Songho followed Hiran's usual routine every time he returned home. Taeyol himself didn't realize that the man wasn't Hiran. In the neighborhood, there was actually a woman who had fallen for Songho, but because Taeyol was more attractive to him, he didn't even notice her. Day after day, Songho kept coming to Taeyol's house and doing the same thing, until one night Taeyol discovered that the person she was flirting with wasn't her husband, but rather her neighbor. Strangely, Taeyol didn't chase Songho away. Instead, he asked him to continue. He said that Songho was better at flirting than Hiran. From then on, they grew closer, and Songho no longer needed to sneak over to Taeyol's house. He would wait for him and repeat the incident. Their relationship spiraled out of control, and Songho even became jealous when he saw Taeyol flirting with Hiran. One night, a criminal was in the neighborhood, and Hiran took him to the police station. Taeyol was home alone, and of course, Songho took this opportunity to come and flirt with him. The next night, the residents gathered and joked around. Among them was Mrs. Kiwok, who accidentally saw Songho enter Taeyol's house. After several hours, Mrs. Kiwok was surprised that Songho hadn't come out. She began to suspect something was wrong. A few moments later, Hiran returned home, and Mrs. Kiwok was certain there would be major trouble. Sure enough, Hiran caught Songho making out with Taeyol. Hiran was furious and immediately killed Songho. After leaving the house in a state of disarray, Hiran ultimately chose to follow Songho with his own weapon. Several months later, Taeyol gave birth to a baby boy. However, her mental and physical condition was not conducive, so she entrusted the baby to the residents before going to the train tracks to join Hiran and Songho. It turned out that the baby was Chol, and Taeyol was Chol's father. The truth was revealed. Chol then visited the place where his mother died, where he seemed to see a shadow of his mother staring back at him with a smile. Until finally, the film is finished.